Hey, I'm Bruce with JesusWhen.com. We are the ministry dedicated to helping you protect and perfect your salvation as the end times draw near, possibly starting as early as 2030 or 2040. Now, we don't attempt to predict the day or the hour Jesus comes, but he does say we can know when it is near, even at the door. So that's our focus here. Now, for those of you who want to understand those two dates and where that came from, I just posted an article on the website, JesusWhen.com, titled My Generation, wherein I explain where those numbers come from. Now, the understanding of generation is agreed and understood by many writers, scholars, and commentators. I've only taken it to the next level by bringing it up and identifying all of the pieces that the prophecy talks about, because they've happened and we can identify the dates that those events took place. We didn't used to be able to do that, but they've now taken place, and we can know that we are close to the return of Christ. Okay, now what we're going to do in these videos here over the next several weeks, we're going to take a different topic of end time prophecy each week, and then Monday through Friday what we're going to do is look at a different aspect of that topic, and then on Friday it'll just be a wrap-up of everything that we've talked about during the week. This week we're going to talk about the grand overview of what God is doing, and the first thing we want to talk about is what is important to God. And before I get into that, I want to take a second and ask you, what is the most important event in the life of a family as between the parent and the child? Okay, think about that for a second. While you're thinking about it, I want to tell you that my son got married. It's actually going on like a couple years ago. But what was interesting about the wedding, aside from how beautiful and emotional and exquisite everything was, it went off perfectly, except that the weather leading up to the wedding was just not cooperating whatsoever. For the rehearsal dinner, it was raining like crazy. Even the morning of the wedding, it was a day wedding, but even the morning the clouds were there. We thought more rain was coming, and then all of a sudden, about 2 hours before the wedding started, the clouds completely broke. Down comes the sun, and it's almost like God said, "I'm here, let's go." So it was a spectacular event where, at least for me, God made his presence known. Now, let's get back to my question. What is the most important event in a family as between the parents and the child? Now, if you didn't get the hint about my older son's wedding, that's it. Okay, there's a lot of things that are important. Many, many things are important in that relationship. But I put forth to you that probably one of the most important is the wedding, where the child gets married and starts his own life, his own children, and the new cycle of life starts all over again. Okay? Now, the reason I point that out is because that is also the most important thing to God. Now, how many of you know that Jesus is going to get married? Have you thought about that? The Lamb of God is going to get married to his bride, who is, help me out here, the church. You read about it in Revelation. You've probably heard about it from various preachers, various articles you've read. It talked about all the time. You can look up tons of detail on the internet about it. It's the wedding of the Lamb of God to his bride, the church. But what's important to us, thinking about end time prophecy, is that is the central focus of what God is doing. And in the grand overview and the attitude of God towards these end times, his focus is that wedding. The wedding of his son, his only begotten son, Jesus, to his bride, the church. And that wedding is going to take place And all of the events that lead up to that wedding, they're in preparation for that wedding. And I'm going to explain that later this week. Okay? But it's not all about, I mean, there's a lot of negative things you read about in Revelation, you read about in Daniel, you hear about from the pulpit, you hear about in the articles. All of that is going to take place, but I will explain to you this week what God is really doing so that it'll make your understanding of prophecy straight. I won't say simple, that's probably too much of an overstatement, but it will make it easy to understand what's happening in prophecy. Okay? So at the end times, God says, my son is getting married. Think about that. My son is getting married. Just like I told everybody I know as the wedding got closer, my wife told everybody she knew as the wedding got closer, our son is getting married. And God says, my son is getting married. And all of this, everything that happens is related to that marriage and happens because of and for that marriage. And when you get that, so listen in this week, when you get that, you will be much more prepared to understand end time prophecy. Okay? So stay tuned. We've talked about kind of the grand overview and that God is looking at getting at the marriage that he's preparing for his son, Jesus Christ, to his bride, the Lamb of God. So tune in tomorrow. We are going to look at the wedding itself. Now, you can get the outline of the whole series on the website, JesusWhen.com. But tomorrow, the marriage, Wednesday, the gift that God is going to give, and that you have to tune into. Thursday, we're going to talk about the bride. Friday, we're going to tie it all together. Okay? So you can tune in a little bit every day, get all of this in bite-sized pieces, digest each piece as you go along. You can wait, you can binge watch all of these, any way that you want to do it. But bottom line is this is critical to understanding prophecy. This is the number one underlying foundational fact you need to understand why God is doing what he is doing during the end times. Tune in tomorrow where I will talk about the wedding. See you then.